Hey, listen!
Hey everybody, welcome to the Glasses Push. My name's Chuck, and today we're doing something a little different. I'd like to welcome you to my first ever video game review. We'll be reviewing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch. So why, after over a year of book reviews, switching to some video games? Well, I believe in the merit of storytelling in all formations, and while I feel most at home talking about books, I believe that video games as a medium have a lot to offer, and having just finished this, I'm really excited to share my opinions, especially considering that the story element of Breath of the Wild is one of the more discussed elements of it. The game, in a nutshell, is much different than any other Zelda game. There's always been a nature of exploration in this action-adventure where it requires a lot of conversation in order to figure out exactly what you're supposed to do next. Overall, very minimal hand-holding, the obnoxious Navi aside. However, Breath of the Wild goes full open world where there is so little story and hand-holding that one of the central elements of your character is that you cannot remember anything that has happened to you. You only find the true overarching story through random memory discoveries over time as you progress. It's an especially interesting mechanic and a very interesting way to immerse a person in the story and get you on the same page as the protagonist without a bunch of clunky exposition. So they just basically wipe it out. And as you explore the game, when you discover the story, you're also having to constantly discover new locations, new components of your map, which has been blacked out, and the most dramatic change, constantly getting new weapons and making yourself new food. In this game, you're not going to find just random hearts lying around. If you break open a pot, you're going to have to pick up mushrooms out in the forest. You're going to have to kill a wolf. And then if you want to get the most benefit out of the food, you're going to have to cook it. Also, your weapons break often, which can seem like a very frustrating mechanic until you play the game and realize that by vanquishing one enemy and getting a new weapon, there's a degree of excitement and also a degree of realism brought into the game. So from that element, there are a lot of changes that make it a very exciting new experience. And I will tell you, the first time you get into the full open world map is really the first true wow moment of the game, when you just realize how far you have to go, and all along the way you're going to have to make the effort to improve yourself. Just absolutely jaw-dropping. From there are some, but not many, very set goals that you'll need to accomplish if you want to beat the game, but what makes the game truly exciting is that there are so many side quests to explore along the way. You can be going to a village to try and find some information and stumble upon something called a shrine, which basically anyone familiar with the Zelda games will recognize as basically like a mini dungeon puzzle, where you'll just have to figure out, using your unique abilities, how are you going to get out of this room and get something that will help you expand your either hearts or your stamina. So in that way, where all of the previous Zelda games really kind of had more of a focus on these big temples. I mean, especially in Ocarina of Time, that's what it was all about. But this time around, the puzzles are much more spread out, since there are, likely somewhere around 100 shrines throughout the entire game for you to discover, some of them very well hidden. It makes it a constantly engaging experience, so while you're heading on your quest, you're still challenged, and it's not just it's the popular analogy. It's not just a Lord of the Rings, the walking simulator. There's a lot more to it than that. Although I will say, when you are walking, the scope of the game is just huge, and so these shrines just kind of help break up the experience, along with random enemy encounters and a nighttime system where certain enemies will only populate during the night. So all of this said about the small things of the game, the large portion of the story involves 4 main encounters that you can choose to do before going on and facing the big bad of Ganon. And I would say that when you first get a sense of how big the world is, if that's the first wow moment, then this is like a level above that, like a OMG or Jeepers or Gee Willikers moment, or all of those put together into some type of portmanteau. The bosses and the experience of these 4 central challenges has the scope almost of something out of either Shadow of the Colossus or God of War, just these really large-scale things, larger than life, and really gives a sense of grandeur to an already giant game, which again makes it a much more novel concept and switches up the experience from your usual, okay, go to this main area, beat this main bad guy, go again off to this main area, beat this main bad guy. And for each 4 of the 4 encounters, there is a puzzle or something you're going to have to figure out, where it's not just a button masher, which you can rightfully accuse God of War of getting into sometimes, although there is a very great puzzle and story element to that. So in terms of gameplay, the variety of things you can do, very astonishing, and it is an absolutely beautiful game, whether you're playing on the TV or on the handheld version of the Switch. It has a style that is pseudo-realistic with a little bit of the cell shading style that was so polarizing in Wind Waker, but toned down to be a lot more realistic. It's a very beautiful feel. There are numerous times in the game where it's just a picture-perfect moment, just practically a work of art, just staggeringly beautiful. The control scheme is very intuitive. About the only shortcomings I would say the game has from a playability aspect are the camera occasionally when you're fighting a boss just isn't as natural as you'd want it to be, or if you're climbing up or down some passageway and you get too near the ground, or another corner wall, you can kind of lose sight for a moment. These moments are brief, but still a little frustrating, since being aware of the camera can take you out of the story a little bit. And also there are certain special moves that you acquire throughout the game that also aren't tremendously well documented from a control perspective, where in fact, there is one special ability that I unlocked during the game, and I never figured out how to use it. I had forgotten after the first time I was told, and had no idea how to find out about that again. So, a little frustration there. A lot of people say that the main problem that Breath of the Wild has is that there is just no story at all, just because it is broken into such fragmented pieces where you can have several sessions that are over an hour each time you're playing, and you won't even encounter a shred of story in that. You may encounter other smaller people that have their own unique adventure and side quests for you to go on, but in terms of the overarching story, you don't get a lot. If you look at how the entire game is structured, it is about exploration. It's open world. You're constantly having to discover shrines on your own, find new weapons, cook new food. This is very much a game embodying the notion that the journey is greater than the destination, and with this game, that is the entire point of the story. It's about exploration, not only in terms of discovering the world, discovering new places, but also discovering the story that your character has forgotten, which is very much intentional. I probably spent at least 40 to 50 hours playing this game. My total completion of the game, as noted on the map, is 11%. Granted, these are for the vast majority side quests, but still, just such a staggeringly huge game, which is incredible if you just love the exploration side of things, to know that there is so much more out there. But for me, I'm a very story-driven person, so these little bits of exploration are all great, but at the end of the day, I feel a little aimless, and like it's a little more just grinding. You're just doing the same thing to build up your character, but then for not much payoff, especially since the world is so big and some of these shrines, are mini dungeons, if you will, are so hard to find. It can be exhausting. So having completed the game, it made me feel a little wowed and a little helpless, and this may be a tremendous selling point for some people, but for me, I do appreciate a little more finality, even though I can respect what they're going for. Now, all of this said, there are so many wow moments, Jeepers moments, OMG moments, Zoink Scoob, all those kinds of moments in the game. It is absolutely beautiful. The puzzles are very challenging. Some of the fights are incredibly frustrating, but never truly unfair, because if you understand the right way to go about things, you will then wonder, why did I feel like this was so difficult? And again, to have a game with so little hand-holding, it is kind of freeing, and to see an open world where you really don't ever feel like you're on rails, that there's so much possibility going on. And with me getting the impression with only 11% of the game, I can't even imagine the other side quests that are out there, because there are some pretty elaborate side quests that you find out even if you're not really looking for them. What would I rate the game? A 90. So it's an A. It's an excellent game, certainly not a waste of your time, but it can be very overwhelming, especially if you're not used to this type of experience, and especially it being so different than another Zelda game, but when somebody can take such a risk and have the gameplay mechanic work so well with the overarching story and the theme of the game, that really is a beautiful thing and shows and is just one of many examples of how video games are an art form, and it really is, in a way, its own interactive story. So I'm very curious, though, to hear what you thought of the game, or how you feel about video games as a medium in general with storytelling. What are some of your other games that you enjoy? Really, this entire channel is about connecting with you all and bonding over, or politely disagreeing about things. I think that having these discussions are very interesting, especially across different media. That I think everything has a story to offer, and I'm really interested to hear what your story is with this game and what you thought. So that concludes this first video game review for the Glasses Push, and this is Chuck for Glasses Push out. I keep wanting to push them further, and I fear I will dent my brain one day. Not gonna stop me from doing it though.